Is everybody cool with us recording this? No problems? Okay. And again, we'll make it available to everybody. We'll keep everybody on mute, but we'll have a big Q&A session. And say hello to my colleague Sia she's in the top left corner. She's helping out today because I have a little bit of technology challenges. And so she'll make sure for handle all the PowerPoint slides. And hopefully we're all ready. So when I want to take you quickly to sort of the genesis of how this came about. And I've got a lot of written notes. So if I look down, I'm not texting. It's just I want to make sure I cover everything properly. So I sent out the Q&A to everybody asking for your burning questions, biggest concerns, that type of thing. And it was not surprisingly, was an unbelievable overlap of concerns and burning questions. And this is very common, or the questions that were asked, or the burning questions that are asked, very common. I just had no context for where everybody is in the process of acquiring a business. And so it's a good thing because we can go back and somewhat start at the beginning. But the two common themes and out of the answers, and I think there's about 25 or 28 of them, and I think 23 or 24 came back with the two same things, which is making sure you buy the right business and generating quality deal flow. So that's where we're going to concentrate today. There's a couple other questions that came in as well that we'll go over, and there'll be plenty of time towards at the end to allow for all of the questions. But the content is going to be geared towards those two particular subjects. And one of the things that's very important is want to outline for you guys how you go through this whole process, because my objective always is for people to buy a business in 6 months, because that's a very, very doable time frame. And to get the most out of this meeting, there's a couple things to keep in mind. Number one, you got to be open-minded and forget all your assumptions. You don't want to have the ideal thing is to have an I know nothing attitude, and don't let your education get in the way of knowledge. In other words, we're in the world of practicality now. Understand that you must begin at the beginning. And what I've seen, and I've been doing this for 34 years and more on the buy side for 20 plus years, and very often buyers try to reinvent the wheel, and they go off the reservation and they don't get any results. And so what happens is they all come back or they fail. It's one of the two. So it's very important that you separate yourself from the crowd. You have tons of competitors. Everybody on this phone is your competitor. And there's about 15 million of you looking at anyone in any course of any 1 year in the United States. And so you want to separate yourself from the crowd with knowledge, being able to work fast and hard, and being able to demonstrate that you're a serious buyer. That's really important. We're going to cover all those things. And to give you a little bit of background about myself, I've been in the world of, I say M&A because everybody likes to use that term. I'm a real simple guy. I like to call it buying and selling businesses. I'm not fancy. I've acquired 14 of my own companies, including one co-investment, and deal sizes from $50,000 to $208 million. So it's a pretty big range. And I started out acquired my first business with $30,000. And that's about today's equivalent to about $75,000. So it's definitely doable. And I'm the poster child of that. I don't have a college degree, and I'm not going to give you a sob story or rags to riches story, but it's a pretty good story. But I'll save you all the gory details because it's probably the intro to every one of the podcasts. If you've seen any of them, I've done 51 podcasts in the last 3 months. I'm not the host. I've been on guesting on 51 podcasts. I just counted because it was getting so crazy. So if you see any of those, you usually see the bio in the introduction. I've, in addition to my own acquisitions, I've represented buyers and sellers more aggressively in over the last 20 years, and do lower market. It's lower market's not clearly defined, but businesses probably typically EBITDA of businesses $2.5 to $7.5 million. And I've always done buy side representation as well. In 2017, it was the second time that Ray Dalio, I don't know if you guys know who Ray Dalio is, from Bridgewater. In 2017, he hired me for the second time, and I went into business with Ray and as a partner, and Ray's eldest son, Devin, And the Dalio family office and Ray hired me to mentor Devin to teach him how to buy businesses. And we had a company called P Squared. And my role was mentoring Devin, who I knew from a number of years before because I had worked with him earlier. And Ray was our only investor. And we made a number of acquisitions and what have you. And then, unfortunately, my partner, Devin, who was him and I were close like brothers. He was killed in a car accident on December 17th, 2020. And if you follow Ray at all, you would know about that. And my point for telling you this is I'm not a name dropper, but I want you to get the very good and very, very deep understanding that I always figured if my knowledge, and I like to try to think that I'm pretty humble, but if my knowledge is good enough for Ray Dalio, it's probably good enough for all of you guys on this phone, on this Zoom call. And Jessica Collin, wave Jessica. Jessica, I met Jessica in Mexico in January. Jessica is part of a group called Regenerative Capital Group, and anybody who's on this call who is living in Canada or consider moving to Canada, you should look this group up. They're the ultimate funded search, and they had 172 applicants. I think it was 172, and they narrowed it down to 5, and Jessica is one of the 5. And she, what they did, the founder of Regenerative is a man by the name of Mike Miller and another gentleman by the name of Cordell Jacks in concert with Mike's partner, Iggy Domagalski. And they bought my course in 2007. They went out and bought a bunch of businesses afterwards. Small businesses, and then they ended up building them up to over $200 million in revenue, and they sold out for $100 million to Wajax, which is a big company in Canada. It's actually older than Canada, Wajax itself, and Iggy became the CEO. And when they decided that they were Mike to really give back, he wanted to underwrite 5 CEOs in residence a year for the next 10 years, so 50 people. And Jessica, congratulations to Jessica, is one of the winners out of a pretty substantial application process. And then we met in Mexico because Mike brought me to Mexico to do basically a big part of the education in their boot camp. And poor Jessica had to listen to me for 9 hours over 3 days. You guys only have to listen to it for about an hour, but it was very informative. And Jessica, if you want to put on your mic and take 30 seconds, maybe you can tell everybody quickly, what you found good about what we talked about, bad or what have you, or impact that it's had. I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you could take a few seconds, that would be great.
No, I'm happy to. And I know you said that it was 9 hours, but I guess I'm back for more. So that should tell you how helpful it was. And it's always good just to meet other searchers in the ecosystem. The point that I'll make is, you said we're all competitors, but I think, once I have joined the search space, some of the best people in the space are searchers, and the collaborative nature is incredible. But no, in terms of what I learned, I think I am a new searcher. So having the combination of the course, having the search broken down, it simplified it. I reference it every single day of my search. It's directly applicable. And what I love about it is it was wonderful to have those 9 hours with you, but even without that, I would have been prepared with the course to be able to go take that information and buy a really great business. And
Beautiful.
so and I think that that's how Iggy and Mike started their journey as well. So yeah,
Great.
it's really helpful.
Thank you, Jessica. Now, having said that, I want to tell you why I'm not doing this call. This is not an infomercial. This is not a webinar to sell you my course. It's none of that. It makes no difference to my life whatsoever. That is not the genesis for all of this, and I'll explain to you in a minute how this all came about. I believe you should, because it's proven to be an unbelievable success story for tens of thousands of people for a number of years. And this is the type of stuff that we do on an ongoing basis with our clients, because I always include consulting. The other thing that today is not about is I'm not selling blocks of consulting or boot camps or master camps or any of that nature. I have a stable of a few clients. I have a waiting list of clients, so even if anybody wanted to do it, I can't do it. But this is not about that at all. There's a course and there's stuff, a program that we sell, but it's not about selling that at all. If you decide that that's what road you want to go down, I think Jessica's a good testament to that. And we have tens of thousands of clients who've bought businesses over the years. That's your decision. I'll give you the information right at the end of the day. But this is not what this is about. Let me tell you why I am doing this. I am really disturbed about the amount of misinformation on the internet related to what you guys want to achieve. It is frightening to me. And it's frightening to me in a couple of regards. One, there's just general basic misinformation, which I categorize as uber generic, useless information that you couldn't use to buy a lemonade stand. And there's a lot of that. And then on the flip side, you have these um, self-anointed gurus pitching programs for tens of thousands of dollars in boot camps and mastermind groups and consulting programs. And it's horrific to me. Most of these people have never even done what you guys are trying to do. They're great marketers. They're slick. They're scam artists, as far as I'm concerned, and they make my blood boil because I think it's really offensive what they're doing. They're taking people who have hopes and dreams and being able to make an acquisition, and they're taking advantage of that by making promises and that are just not going to work in the real world. And so my advice to you with all of those is don't waste your money. Just don't waste your money, don't waste your time. And your best barometers for all of those programs, if someone doesn't offer you an unbelievable refund for an informational product, never buy it. I mean, I bought some over the years, and that's my stress test for whether or not I think this is going to be worth it. The second part of this is I've been on Search Funder for I think about 3 months or whatever. And at the beginning, I got very, very engaged in answering posts and whatever. And then it started to really resonate with me that while Search Funder is a phenomenal platform conceptually, and I think it's great that everybody's part of it, there's a fundamental flaw, which is there's a whole group of individuals like yourself who are new at this, no track record, looking to acquire knowledge, oftentimes having to figure out financing, but really no experience in this. And there's questions being posed by individuals, by yourself, and you're answering questions also by a similar group that has no experience, no knowledge, no expertise. And it's really, Jessica will laugh because we talked about this in Mexico. Like, with all due respect, it's like, to a big extent, it's the blind leading the blind. And I started answering some of those questions, and it's very disturbing to me because I think you go way off tangent. You have to get answers from believable parties. That's what you have to do in this process. And that means if you have other searchers who are commenting on a question that you have, if anybody doesn't start off with an answer that says, here's what I've done and it's worked very successfully, don't pay attention to the comment. I mean, everybody means well, but it's not valuable information because it's not based on any performance, any outcomes. So I advise you to really be cautious. I started saving all the posts and all the answers, and it was really disturbing to me. And so again, I don't want to knock the platform. I'm on it. I think it's got some great attributes, but get your information from believable parties, people that have done what you want to do. And that's the oldest formula for success, is find someone who's already done what you're hoping to accomplish and just copy them. So that's the genesis for why I'm doing this. The combination of like this gross misinformation from these alleged gurus, and I think there's bad information on posts and being answered. And it's very easy when you're not sure about things to get pulled in a bunch of different directions. I'll tell you a little bit about the business types and things that I look at. I believe in buying rock solid businesses. Good businesses, rock solid. I don't like garbage businesses, and I don't like great businesses. I like them right in the middle, where they're good and I have an opportunity to acquire them and put my stamp on them. The same way with people who follow our materials, put your stamp on them, buy a good business that can transition well to you, and you can grow. I don't believe in distressed businesses or delusional deal terms. I operate in the real world, and breathe oxygen from this planet. So these ideas of buying, these phenomenal businesses for no money down, it just doesn't work in the real world. And whether that you have a lender or a finance behind you or getting investors, you'll see they understand no one's buying businesses for no money down. I'm doing this for 34 years. I've done it once, and that happened by accident. My strategies are they're simple, effective, they're blunt, and they've been proven in tens of thousands of deals. One of the things to consider is the process of buying a business is not difficult, but it's complex. And in order to take something that has complexities to it, you got to reduce it to bite-sized pieces so it becomes very manageable. And that's the way I approach buying a business. I've talked to you about Mike and Iggy and the right approach to business, and Jessica commented on. So I want to jump in. I've got a bunch of questions that people asked that I want, if it's okay, outside of, I would say that 90% of the questions and concerns that came in were related to deal flow and the right business. And so what I'd like to do is jump into covering those two categories, spend about an hour, then we can get into the Q&A. And then at that point, any questions, I have them all here. I got prepared for everybody. The questions that we're not going to be covering in today's sessions, and we'll talk about those first, and I'll answer those for any of the other individuals. Does that sound good for everybody? All good? Got it.
Sounds great.
If you have any questions or what have you, we'll pause in between the two different sections, but preferably I would like to go through these at a reasonably efficient amount of time and then open it up for an hour of at least of Q&A. And then happy to share the PowerPoint presentation. Everybody can have a copy, so you don't even have to take notes. I have just, is that, we're good to go. Okay, Miss Sia, let her rip. Okay, so today we're going to talk about the right business. This week's session, we're going to talk about the right business, and we're going to talk about deal flow. And my intention here is to show you how to explode it. So the big question is how can you initiate deal flow if you don't know what type of business is right for you? But how can you know what's right for you if you don't initiate deal flow? I mean, it's like what comes first, chicken or the egg? And so the thing is that once you know what type of business is right for you, the search becomes real easy. It's remarkable. And so we need to understand, what does the right business mean? Because there's a very, very clear, some very, very clear confusion in the eyes of prospective business buyers of what does the right business mean? Is it you, or is it the business that has to be right? So critically important is for you to understand that first it's you, then it's the business. And this is where people get into trouble, is they focus the other way around, looking at the business and trying to figure out if that's right as far as a business is concerned. But first we have to get crystal clear on what type of business is right for you. So the right business and deal flow are deeply related, because if not, you're just flying all over the place, not making any progress. And so once you hone into the type of business that's right for you, then your deal flow can adjust accordingly. And both require a funnel approach. You want to go from like a shotgun to a laser beam. Okay, next slide, please. Here we go. Let's talk about some of the data in this world. And please excuse me for sniffling. This is the data that I'm going to provide you with, is based on 20 years of dealing with business buyers, tens of thousands of acquisitions of buyers that we monitor constantly, buyer interactions, industry surveys, and my 3+ decades in the M&A world. So the industry statistics are as follows. 94% of the people who begin the search to buy a business never complete a transaction. And the average time that somebody spends to not complete a transaction is 18 months. On the business for sale websites, the publicly listed business for sale websites, and we'll talk about those in a second, 75% of those businesses never sell. And if you spent any time on them, you probably understand why. But that's certainly in the lower market. In the lower market, again, and again, it's not a defined textbook per textbook, but it's 50% of the deals that go into due diligence fall apart and never get to the finish line. And 10% of the businesses sold in America are sold by business brokers. Only 10%, which is pretty interesting because they control about 90% of the business for sale websites. And so people get themselves into a situation where you're looking at a ton of businesses that are by and large not going to sell, and you get stuck in there oftentimes, and you're not seeing 90% of the business that are going to be sold within the marketplace. 15 million people on an annual basis want to do the exact same thing that you want to do. So that's your competition. And if you don't educate, prepare, and separate yourself, you wind up being a 90%er. And so when you look at these numbers, what's very important to understand, if 94% of the people who try this fail, then you've got to spend your time figuring out how the other 6% get it done. Like you don't want to just do what the 94%ers are doing, because the data is indisputable and it's awful. And so the goal is to have a complete shift away from what people are doing, because obviously they're not getting it done. And some of the things that we talk about here, we're going to go into the next slide, is very important to understand how many face-to-face meetings that you have with sellers. Sometimes with brokers, but with sellers. Because an interaction or talking about a business, in my mind, is not an email back and forth. It's not an inquiry that you get an answer back and say, I have a couple of questions. I'm going to give you some data about the formula that gets you to the finish line. So the average on this call, based on the questions that you submitted or the answers you submitted, the average person has spent 5.8 months looking so far, and you've put in less than one offer. And the categories that you have, I went to everybody's profile, the categories that you have of interest to you on your profile within Search Funder, there's an average of 11.75 categories. Business, services, manufacturing, whatever it may be, but the average person on this call has 11.75. And that was consistent because I thought, hey, maybe this is really crazy. This is really a little too large. So I then looked at 150 profiles on Search Funder, and the numbers came in like I think it was like 11.4. So here's the thing, and when you compare and contrast this to get deals done in 4 months, which I call the 44411 formula, you should spend 4 months finding a business. And that means 30 to 40 seller meetings. 4 categories, not 11.75, 4 offers, 1 month in negotiation, 1 month in due diligence. The last 2 may vary a little bit, but those are the numbers based on tens of thousands of acquisitions of what you have to work with. Those are your parameters. So if you've been looking for more than 4 months and you haven't made at least 4 offers, you're already off the reservation, but that's okay. We're going to correct all of it. But you need to understand those numbers, because these are proven data points. So again, don't reinvent the wheel. This is what it takes. So can it be, 44422, meaning, 2 months for negotiation, 2 months due diligence? Certainly. But the first 4s, 4 months looking, 4 categories, 4 offers, that is non-negotiable. And keep in mind, you could never have enough seller meetings. And we're going to get to in a minute why that is so important. First, I want to talk to you about your first line of defense, if you will, with who you're going to come across in this process. So you're going to do dealing with brokers at the beginning. Not always, but it's very common. Businesses for sale, oftentimes with brokers. So understand the brokers, there's only 2 things they want to know. Do you have the money and can you get to the finish line? Other than that, they don't care. There's some brokers who do care, but the majority don't. That's their goal. Do you have the money and can you get to the finish line? End of story. They're not going to keep you in mind. They have a ton of people exactly like you. So what you need to do is you have to keep them in mind to keep you in mind. Because they got people knocking down the door looking to buy businesses, and good businesses sell fast, and but good buyers work fast. They're not on your team. They're a buffer. They provide you with access to listings. They know what it takes to get deals done. And when I say anything negative related to business broker, I do this. I do higher level brokerage. It's a fancy term. They call it investment banking, but it's really just glorified business brokerage. And so anything I say that disparaging, I'm disparaging my own trade to a certain extent, even though I do a limited amount of it. But that's the reality of it. They're not your advisor. They're not going to dispense unbiased advice. They're a conduit and they're part of the process. Lots of them are completely unprofessional, but you want to keep in mind to keep them for them to keep you in mind. And so certain things, like when you have communication with them, act professionally. If a deal doesn't meet your parameters or expectations or interest whatsoever, make sure you respond to them. There's nothing more aggravating for a business broker than someone just goes dark. They send them an overview, you get a sim or a deck, or you sign the NDA, of course, and then you look at it and you have a bunch of questions and then you just disappear. Just be professional. Let them know you're no longer interested, and that's the end of it. And as soon as you're not interested, let them know. Don't waste your time. Don't waste their time. Okay, here we go. Messia. Let's talk about sellers. The two broker items, you have the money, can you get to the finish line, are obviously very important to them. And there's a third. If their legacy is important, they want to make sure that you're the right person to operate the business. If they're financing part of the purchase, they want to make sure you're the right person to operate the business. You have plenty of them that they don't care about their legacy. They just want to sell their business, and that's okay too. But they're certainly worried about the two that the broker are worried about. And this is a third part, which is critically important, especially after reading through so many profiles for individuals that don't have financing lined up or a whole lot of capital on their own. Understand how the importance is of how the seller perceives you as an individual and your ability to operate their business. You've heard the term related to the silver tsunami, which is the business owners that are going to retire over the next number of years. Baby boomers, typically. Keep in mind, these are not your contemporaries. They think, they look, and they act differently. I'm taking a pretty educated guess here that everybody on this call is a lot younger than I am. I'm a baby boomer age. I'm going to be the individual that you would meet selling a business. We have a big disconnect in the way we were brought up, how we perceive the world. Nothing negative, but we come from two different planets, you guys. And so understand that these are not your contemporaries. Over 45% of adults 55 years and over in the United States do not have a college degree. So they are not impressed with yours. I know that's a big part of the search function of the education that you have, and it's important and it's impressive and it's wonderful and it's going to pay great dividends for you. So that's all wonderful. But when you're sitting in front of a seller, that doesn't influence their thought process related to you. So understand that, and that sort of piece of the pie gets elevated inappropriately in the world of search. Because it's like the world's not just waiting for you guys because you graduated from a great school. And again, I'm not saying anything negative. I think it's phenomenal, but understand that doesn't play much of a role. It does if you were going out to potentially with investors. They want to see that. They want to understand your background, your thought process. But with sellers, that doesn't hold a lot of weight, and it certainly doesn't with brokers. If it's a non-proprietary deal, you must impress them that you're the one, especially if there's going to be a challenge for financing. I mean, how you impress them and the mark you make upon them is going to make a massive, massive difference. I apologize for a second, but something just popped up that it says to confirm my language. It says it sounds like I'm speaking Arabic. Okay, here we go. Sorry. So it's very important that you press upon them. They've paid their dues. Many buyers haven't, so be mindful of that. You know, a lot of baby boomers, they rolled up their sleeves, got their fingernails dirty, built a business over 30 years. And so very often when individuals are looking to buy a business, they haven't put in that same amount of time. And so be mindful of that. That's where they come from. Okay. Next one, please. So let's talk about the jargon. It's when you're dealing with sellers, just get rid of all the jargon. The world of M&A is very simple. You're talking about buying and selling businesses. Terminology like entrepreneurship through acquisition, searcher, traditional searcher, funded searcher, it's meaningless to them. And I'll show you how in one way, how it, using one of the terms that's commonly used, is very, very negative. And you have to keep that in mind. And so when it comes to jargon, and we're going to talk about how you interact with a seller, just keep it simple with them. That's the way they want to operate. Because if not, if I own a business and you're coming in and you've never bought a business, owned a business, you may have run one, and there's all this language and jargon and what have you that I don't even know what you're talking about, you're not going to impress me. And I'm not saying me personally. You're not going to impress anybody. They don't want to hear that. They just want a human relationship and a conversation with people. And we start with all the jargon. It's very, very intimidating to people. Now, if you're talking about buying $100 million company and they got multi-levels of management and what have you, that could be a little different. But owner-operated business is lucky if you have a second tier of management, companies doing $10, $20 million a year, or even on the much lower end. businesses doing a couple of $1 million a year. The jargon it just does not impress them. And sorry if anyone's taking it as I'm bursting anybody's bubble here, but that's just the reality of it, of the situation. You want to have meaningful conversations. You want to get to know them first and they you. This is really, really important to have that type of interaction, especially because the market, they'll see a lot of buyers if it's not a proprietary deal. And the way you stand out is you stand out with your personality. And it's a much better way to set the table. Don't sit in front of them with a laptop taking notes. And don't be like other buyers. You want to have your 36 questions ready. We talk about that at another time, but that's exactly what we lay out. You want to have some pre-meeting research on the industry, their company, the competition, so that when you go in there, you can have a meaningful conversation, then they see you've done your homework and they'll be impressed with you. Let's talk about your funding. Unless you are funded, you're not a searcher. So adjust your thinking and your presentation. And the danger of the term, there is danger with this term. You're not a searcher. You're a business buyer, you're an investor, you're an operator. The word searcher is wonderful within the universe of search funds. Outside of that, doesn't mean anything to anybody. And especially doesn't mean anything to business brokers. They look at it because if you say to a broker or a seller who may have come across other individuals and you say to them, I am a searcher, the first question they're going to ask you is, are you funded? And most of you aren't. And so you've already put yourself behind the 8 ball. And they don't even know what a searcher is. You're not a searcher. Here's what you are. And I don't even like the term altogether because to me, it just plays perfectly with this idea that people spend 18 months looking and never buy a business. Call yourself a finder. How's that? Because that's the goal. You're not a searcher. You're a finder. But certainly in the eyes of people you speak with, you're either, I'm a business buyer, I'm an investor, or I'm an operator. I saw questions on Search Funder where someone was asking, what should I put down as my title in the letter that I'm sending out to people? And when I saw some of the answers, it's like I wanted to vomit. It's like ridiculous. Don't over-engineer this. You're a buyer. That's it. You're in the world of buying and selling business. You're a buyer. You're an investor. That's what I want to know. So, and to people with outside of this universe of search funds, they don't even know what the hell it means. Your bio and your website should reflect reality. So many searchers have a website and you go in there and the links on top, it says team, mission, criteria. Team. Click on it. One person. That's not a team. That's one person. Okay. Criteria. Wrote this down here. Give me a second here. Because I wrote one down recently that I came across that was so phenomenal. That here's what they marked as far as the mission is concerned. Looking to acquire an exceptional business and collaborate with stakeholders to create a culture of inclusion and engagement within a win-win environment through the application of technology and best practices with a synergistic mindset to scale. What the hell is that? And I mean, like, okay, I'm not the sharpest guy in the room, admittedly. No clue what that is. When people go that and you're giving your bio, that's not you. It just makes no sense whatsoever. You know what your team is? You're the team. You don't have to hide anything. Everything, whatever you are, is going to, you look worse if you try to present something that's not real. And so a website is great. Have bullet point criteria, and we'll talk about a buyer, whatever. Here's who I am. Here's what I'm looking to accomplish. And the story. You're not going to BS your way to them thinking that you're Warren Buffett, which everybody seems to try to do, or a disproportionate amount. It's not a team. You don't need a link for a team if you don't have a team. Okay, if there's two of you, that's different. But that's it. And don't suggest you have a portfolio of companies if you don't. You're looking to buy one business. Yes, you want a one-pager. Yes, it's terrific to have a website. Clients of mine have been doing that for years. I've suggested it for years. Get to the point of who you are, what you are, and what you're looking for. When you talk about lining up your funding, your timing is yesterday, as you guys know. I'm not sure, maybe by a show of hands, who here is not funded? So anybody who hasn't raised their hand has their financing lined up? Could nod, yes. Great. If you don't have your funding lined up, and if you're in America, first thing is you want to make sure you go get yourself SBA pre-qualified, even if you have no intention whatsoever of using SBA financing. Get yourself SBA pre-qualified. Any lenders that you're working with, make sure they give you a benign, it's a letter, it's a non-committed letter, but there's a proof of funds letter that you have. I know that's like search fund 101, but make sure you have a letter from them, and they're going to say, well, we can't commit to money till we know what the business is. And you say, I'm not asking you to commit to money. I just want a benign letter that I can be able to present to people. So in the event they ask me, because they will ask you, that you can present to them that under the right scenario, they're prepared to fund you. And other lenders or whatever letters or guys that you can get, and whatever, whether it be from a personal financial statement or family. I've come across a lot of people on search fund there that they they don't know how they're going to finance it. And if you don't have any options for financing, you actually do have options. Seller financing is a big part of these equations, and it's becoming more prevalent even in the larger deals. 91% of our clients get seller financing. A component of it would varies greatly from, it could vary from 15, 20 to 90%, but it's part of the deal. And you're seeing more and more deals, the larger deals now, almost all of them, even with PE firms, have a component of seller financing. So it's a possibility. If you want to attract funding before you find a business, better demonstrate you're a savvy buyer. Because there's two parts of this. People that are going to investors that will potentially put money on you are going to put money on you based on your skill set and capability. But before then, they want to know that you're prepared to go through this process in an effective manner, because they don't have any interest in you coming into a business, which makes no sense. So you need to demonstrate your first piece of knowledge is related to the process of acquiring a business. And hopefully, if there's any questions related to financing, I just wanted to cover that briefly. We'll go over it after, because I know it's top of mind for a lot of people. So let's talk about, before we get to the path to success, let's talk about the path to failure and how people become 90%ers. They use the SWOT method. Anybody here familiar with the SWOT method? Like strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. In this process, it actually means a staggering waste of time. Okay, that's the SWOT method. And that's what 94% of the people do. Here's what they do. They pick 7 to 10 categories of businesses that they're looking at. And the average on this call is 11.75%. Doesn't work. They scour the business for sale websites, call brokers, send inquiries, or other shotgun solicitations, looking at hundreds of listings, trying to figure out which, if any, may be right for them. And I'm sure this sounds familiar to a lot of you on this call. This is the guaranteed way to fail, and I will bet on it. Okay. They speak to the other side, and if you do find a seller, and they get right into the weeds. So you find a seller that you're interested, or business you're interested, or you get a broker, and the first reaction is, let me look at the financials, the history, the growth, the competition, the industry, potential threats, deal terms, how long on the market, etc. And they're all the right questions, but they're at the wrong time. The good questions that you need to be asking sellers, they're just part of them. What do you do each day? If you can spend all your time doing one thing, what would it be? And why don't you do it? If you could duplicate yourself, would the business grow? How much? And why haven't you done it? Other questions that I love is, what keeps you up at night about the business? If you get hit by a Pepsi truck, what happens to the business? These are things that you have to dig into, because you want to find out the guts of what drives that business, what that owner does every day, and whether or not you match with them. And we're going to get into this in great detail. But the questions are not related to the fundamentals of the business at the beginning. That's all easy stuff. First, you have to figure out if you're the right person for the business. And if everybody's questions are accurate as to what concerns you, don't get into the weeds. You can get into those later. You first have to get to the driver of the business. What drives the revenue and profits of the business? Because in the lower market, by and large, it's the owner of the business who does the driving. And so unless you match that, okay, all these other questions related to the financials and the growth it's meaningless. Meaningless. So you got to stay out of the weeds. And then what they typically do is they keep looking and claiming there's no good deal flow. And I'll argue with that because for me, for deal flow, I can find deal flow. I will bet anyone I could buy a business in 30 days. And I'm not trying to be cocky. It's just because I'm very in tune with what I know, what type of business matches with my skill set. So let's go on to the path to success. Going from the top left. Number one, you determine your greatest skill. You look at 4 categories, not 12, to search to match your skill to a type of business. So it's a drop down. It goes, and we'll talk about this, from categories to business type. You develop your 5 golden rules, and maybe Jessica will smile because your 5 golden rules, which we're going to talk about, which is critical, and I'll give you mine and how to go about doing this, are critically important. Then from that, you conduct a focus search. You find it. You confirm it meets your 5 golden rules and 10 commandments, which we'll do in a later session, maybe in a couple of weeks from now. You negotiate, you go into due diligence, and you buy it. That's the process of buying a business. It's very, very simple, and it works over and over again. And some of you will be looking at this saying, obviously. Well, you know what? Obviously, if it was so obvious, more people would be doing it properly. Let's talk about now determining the right business for you. If you're 100% certain what type of business you want to buy, hang on for the next section when we talk about deal flow. There's 2 prongs to this, to the right business. Number 1 is your skill set, and number 2 are your golden rules. And they're symbiotic. Determining the right business for you is everything. There's 23 steps in the process of buying a business that we lay out on our material. From the first thing is things that you should consider, straight through to your post-purchase priorities. And there's 21 steps in between that. If you do a marginal job on 22 out of 23 things, but you do a flawless job on identifying what type of business is right for you, and you buy the business right for you, for the most part, you're going to be okay. But you can't do it the other way around. If you get everything right related to the entire buying process, but you buy a business that does not fit perfectly with your skill set, you're going out of business pretty quickly. It's not like buying real estate. It's not like where you overpay for real estate, and as long as you can service the debt, the building will still be standing in a year. If you buy the wrong business, you're going to go out of business in a year. And I'm not trying to be negative. I'm as optimistic as anybody you'll ever meet in your life. I just know that this is the reality, and it's that important. And this is where you have to start. And don't worry about it, because most people have no clue what type of business is right for them. So here's the mantra that's really important. Whatever it is that you do best has to be the single most important driving factor of the revenue and profits of any business you consider purchasing. And I'm going to repeat that, and you could write it down. Whatever it is that you do best has to be the single most important driving factor of the revenue and profits of any business you consider purchasing. End of story. Because for everything else, you can hire. Now we'll talk about experience versus expertise. Don't confuse the two. Experience is what you may have done, worked in an industry or sector. That's experience. That's not expertise. Expertise is what you have done in your past or up to this point that rises to the top as your number 1 skill set, without question. So don't confuse the two. Very important that you understand that this is a process for some people to understand that skill set, but don't confuse. For example, I had a lot of questions of people, do you have to buy a business in an industry you're familiar with? Absolutely not. I mean, it's good, but it's not critical, because it's much easier to learn an industry than it is to learn a top skill set. So don't confuse the two, and don't convince yourself that you're something you're not. The big question is, everybody has one skill, and you have to determine what's yours. Then one of the questions that was asked related to passion, and everybody gets set back when they say passion is completely overrated when it comes to buying a business. Your passion's going to come later. At the beginning, it all sounds wonderful, but when you start running the business and you're feeling good about yourself and you're growing the business and you're empowering employees and your lifestyle's getting better, that's when the passion's going to come. The other stuff is just preconceived passion. So don't get obsessed with you. You've got to do something you like, and it's got to be in an industry that you're, of course, proud of, but getting obsessed with this idea of having something that it's got to be something I'm passionate about. Chances are you won't be that passionate about it. But as you start to grow the business and you start to feel really good about yourself and you've accomplished this transaction and you're growing it, the passion explodes. So here, to determine your greatest skill, Triangulate with colleagues, former bosses, clients, and suppliers. What you like to do may not be what you're really good at. And if this is all new to you and there's no one skill, there are some options. Sometimes makes sense to do a partial acquisition or apprentice within a company. Critically important to meet with sellers and other business owners and determine what drives their business, what they do every day, and whether your skill set matches that perfectly. Where if you're a generalist or a newbie in all of this, you may be good at a bunch of things and not great at any. You need a business where the owner has the same talent, or you need a simpler, smaller to run business. Don't get delusional. So this method works. It's a 10-step method and it works repeatedly. The goal is to go from sectors, which are industries, to types of businesses, to specific businesses. So sectors would be something like residential services. Types of businesses would be within residential services. I'm just pulling any example. HVAC, pest control, cleaning services, for example, and a specific business within that would be pest control. So the idea here is to go from sectors to specific businesses, and we talk about your 5 golden rules. And I'm going to find mine here so I can give you an idea. Let me give you the theory behind it. It's to be able to match as a second level, once you understand and get a good idea of your business that's right for you, to make sure that the business meets your golden rules for business. Your rules are different than my rules. Your rules will probably evolve. Mine are pretty set because I've just been doing this a long time. And they must be specific about you and the fundamentals of the business. You don't say something like, oh, I want to do something I enjoy. That's not specific. You may say something like, I want the business to work in a sector of healthcare that deals with the elderly. That's specific because that's something that you feel you're going to enjoy. Let me tell you what my 5 are, because they'll give you a bit of a guideline. So I like businesses, and I'll only buy businesses that are sales and marketing driven, because that's my best skill set. I like businesses with high margins, and there's demand in place. And relative to the first 3, I don't care about the revenue of the business because I'm confident in my sales and marketing ability. So as long as the margins are high, I know if I build a sales, the profits will follow because we've got high margins. So sales and marketing driven, high margins, demand in place. I like an element of exclusivity, whether it be the product, the service, or the geography. And I don't want a business that competes on price, because that to me is not a sustainable model. I also have a 6th and 7th, which are not that important, which I like fewer employees and recurring revenue. But those top 5, I will never buy a business that has 4 of them. They're unbreakable. And so what I would urge you after this call is you should take a stab at your 5 and be very, very specific. They're going to evolve over time, especially if you haven't bought businesses before, and you can work on them, but take a stab at them, because then you have the ability. You got 2 parts of this process. Once you identify your skill set, and then the fundamentals of the business have to match that or not. You have to excuse me for a second because I need to blow my because of my cold here. Sorry. Step number 2. Here we go. Choose 4 sectors, not 12. Whichever ones you want and however you want to find them, it makes no difference. I love the business for sale databases online, even though we all readily acknowledge most of those businesses are complete crap. They're not going to sell, but it's a perfect place for you to do your laboratory work, because you have a wide swath of them, all kinds of prices, and you could do your work within those areas easily. No cost to you, and just an abundance of businesses within every category. So don't discount those. Don't even pay attention related to the size. This is a science experiment and you perceive it as your laboratory. So ones like, business for sale websites, or ones like Axial are the easiest regardless of size. Don't duplicate the types yet. So for example, there's no need for 3 pest control businesses if you're looking at residential services. You want to take sectors and 4 different types in there, and then you'll get to specific businesses. You target 5 sellers in each category, and don't over-index it. This is you're drilling down to getting to the right business. 4 categories, 4 sectors, 5 sellers in each, and pick 5. Now you've got a sample size of 20. You want to determine what type of business is right for you. Now you have 20 a sample size of 20 businesses, complete variety, because most of you have all kinds of sectors that you think you're interested in. You're going to have an initial call with the broker. Just get past the broker call, whatever it takes, because your goal here is you got to meet sellers face to face. Might have it over Zoom call, but this is not an engagement with a broker. This is quick with the broker. You have got to get to sellers. Even if you have no intention of buying that business, it's too small. You have to do your research to find out what drives that business, what that seller does every day in that type of business. So if you want to buy an HVAC business, as an example, it doesn't, and you want to buy an HVAC business that's generating at least $5 million of revenue, it does not matter if you meet a seller who's got an HVAC business who's doing $800,000, because usually they're very often doing the same thing as far as what drives the business every day. You just have to get in front of sellers. And you hear my voice going up a few octaves. I can't stress to you how important this is, because if not, you're just going to be dancing around the peripheral. You're going to be, you're not going to get into it. You've got to meet with sellers. Then after these 20 meetings, you have post-meeting industry research, where you're going to look at the market, the competition, and speak to other owners in the industry, never disclosing who you met with, but to find out from them, how do you get to step 6 to get to the driver of the business and match it to your skill set? And you could stress test your skill set with non-selling owners. For example, if you think, well, this is my skill set that I need, you can ask other owners in the business, is this what drives the business? And if you're not a perfect match, move on. That business is not for you. That's simple. Don't fall in love with the business or the product, or start to dream about all the great things you'll do with the business. At this point in time, early on, if you're not crystal clear on the type of business that's right for you, this is the process. These are the first 6 steps. And if you have to, and if that doesn't bring you anything, it's rinse and repeat. And here you can duplicate the business types within the sector. So if you're starting to think it's, hey, yeah, you know what, pest control is something I think it's something I could roll up, do something with. You may want to pick out 2 or 3 pest control businesses within a sector for your next round. For step 8, you want to narrow the types down from 4 to 2 or 1, ideally. Remember we talked about a funnel? And in the beginning, keep in mind, we're doing this broad search. Okay? Because when people talk about deal flow, I'm going to explain to you in a second where they just go completely wrong. You want to nail it down to 1 or 2 types. And then you can focus your search accordingly on specific businesses, because this is where you generate deal flow. You don't generate quality deal flow if you have no idea what type of business is right for you and you're just searching by sectors. That's like going hunting with Stevie Wonder. Okay, it's just not going to work. Okay, I promise you, it's not going to work. You're just all over the place. Okay, so you have to get down to specific businesses, and this is the only way to do it if you are not crystal clear on what type of business is right for you. And then next one is refine your golden rules and test your financing options, which you want to run deals by investors. And those are your 10 steps. And I will tell you, they work repeatedly for tens of thousands of people. And so don't shun the simplicity of this, because this is what works. All right. Let's jump into deal flow for a second and see how we're doing on time. Okay, good. So as far as deal flow is concerned, and it's okay with everyone if we save the questions to the end, because we'll be able to go through this about 20 minutes and 15 minutes, and then it'll give us a good 45 minutes for questions. That makes sense for everybody? Okay, good. So deal flow is a challenge at every level due to lack of focus. A deal flow is a challenge for people looking to buy a business on Main Street, or deal flow is a challenge for private equity firms that have, $1 billion under management. Deal flow is a challenge for everybody. On the lower end, it's pretty much spray and pray. But there's 10 million businesses in the United States that are not, single owner operator with no employees. So there's a lot to choose from. So my thinking is, you have 10 million businesses in the US with revenue from $1 million to $10 million. I mean, if that's within your sweet spot, how could deal flow possibly be a problem? It's what you're looking for that's the problem. The goal is you got to get the word out to everyone at every opportunity, in every situation, to the type of business that you're targeting. Telling people I'm looking to buy a business, okay, is meaningless to anybody, the stakeholders in this. But once you can get honed in and you can tell them what type of business that you want to buy, that changes everything. I promise you. Leads come from the craziest, craziest places. I was looking to buy a translation company. And I want to make sure I give you the two examples I was thinking about. And I met with a bunch of sellers, and I really kept enjoying this and thought there was a good opportunity. And during my research, I somehow stumbled across translation of, believe the project, translation of legal documents. And then I found out that there's a whole market for people that do represent themselves in court. They're called pro se litigants, and they create their own legal documents. And I got fascinated with that because the amount of court cases that go on in America is staggering. And I was born in Canada, so we don't sue anybody. I'm an American now, but so now I'm ready to start suing. But no, we don't sue anybody. But Canada, nobody sues anybody. But I couldn't get over the amount of court cases of people that representing themselves. And I ended up searching and I ended up buying a legal document preparation business. And that was all a result of looking at a translation business. I knew the attributes made a lot of sense, the fundamentals, my 5 golden rules passed perfectly, but it shows that leads come from the craziest places. On one when I was looking at I was just going for a walk after my father passed away. I was really a mess. And I was walking in a shopping plaza down where I live in South Florida, and one plaza that was always dead at one end, and saw it was really busy with cars in the middle of the week, and I couldn't understand. And I saw that they had, believe it or not, a shoe store there, which was about 15,000 square feet, selling low-end shoes. Was slammed. It was so busy they had Broward County sheriff's officers controlling traffic. And I was so enamored with this that I ended up getting in touch with the owner because I just couldn't figure out how like the type of hype that he was generating, the excitement, and it ended up acquiring part of his business. And that's all because I needed to clear my head because I was really a mess when my father passed away. I came back from Canada. I went to Dunkin' Donuts to get a coffee. I said, I'm just going to go for a walk. But I guess couldn't stop the wood from burning upstairs, and found this something that, geez, what the hell is going on down there? And that's how so deal flow comes from everywhere. Refine your one page. We talked about this no jargon team portfolio or acquiring exceptional businesses. Make it succinct. And you want to, of course, determine your financing options to the best of your ability. Outreach methods. Buyers at search funders and online forum have it all wrong. They send out emails, they hire virtual assistants, they get onto LinkedIn, they make phone calls, social media posts, blah, blah, blah. It's all wrong, wrong, wrong. Okay. They start with tons of specific businesses or none, trying to figure out which, if any of the business is right. They look at the financial, the growth, etc. But what they're not doing, they're not working on whether or not they are right for the business. So once you have that piece, that changes. That's a game changer, guys and gals. Or worse, they get so enamored with the opportunity, forget to match it. If you use the spray and pray method, focus on the pray part. Okay, because that's your only hope. And I see it with these posts and these questions. Oh, anybody have any suggestions about what's a better methodology for deal flow or whatever? I've hired a virtual assistant. We're sending out emails. Most of these lists that provide email addresses, they don't even know if the email address is correct because they scrape them. And so if you're looking at a company, it's George's Landscape, or Jessica's distribution business. That perked you up. Jessica's distribution business. Well, they send out emails to Jessica's distributionbusiness.com, or they scrape the contact information off a company's website with the suffix of their email address, but it's got to go to the owner. So most of these email lists, they're futile. And it just fits perfectly with the spray and pray attitude, which is not the way you want to do this. There may be a smidgen of that, but you got to get to a focus search. And then deal flow is not a problem. So you're ready. If you have the 1 to 2 types of businesses, specific businesses, you know your 5 golden rules. Now it's laser beam time. So here's what you got to do. Now you can shout it on the mountaintops because you know exactly what you want to buy. Every person you meet, all social media, I'm looking to buy a blank. I'm looking to buy a pest control business. I'm looking to buy a distribution business. I'm looking to buy a manufacturing business. You know exactly what you want to buy. And do you know anybody in that industry that I can talk to? You're not asking, do you know anybody who has a business for sale? You're asking, do I know anybody in that industry that I can talk to? Speak to enough people in any industry, and I guarantee you, they will tell you who is for sale or who they think you should approach. Or maybe they're for sale. But now you are like a laser beam. On your LinkedIn profile, you're not looking to buy a business. You're not a searcher. I am a business buyer, and I'm looking to acquire the following. If you want to search via LinkedIn, then you know specifically the types of businesses that you're going to search on LinkedIn. And then it's going to make sense for you. And now you speak to everybody, brokers. You know, you can get the information, brokers and you can get in touch with plenty of them. Investment bankers. Now, I don't know what size deal everybody's looking for, but keep in mind, investment bankers are not brokers. They're cut above. And they may be too big, but they see a lot of small deals. I do lower market investment banking. So my sweet spot is $2.5 million to $7.5 million of EBITDA. And I only do a few deals a year. And the reason why I do it is after my cherished partner and trusted friend Devin passed away in December of 2020, I was a mess for about 6 months. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I said, I've got to keep myself busy. We've always sold these courses, and it's automated, and I've always provided consulting to people for free as part of that. But I knew I had to keep myself busy. So I said, I'll get back into a little bit of the M&A world because I really had to start focusing my life because I was walking. I spent 6 months walking around my house, and it was just very unhealthy for me. And so I focus on, that size business, and I do a few deals a year. That's it. And it's really to keep myself, the money's great, but I do it to keep myself occupied because financially, thank God, I've done very well. So, but I would go crazy and drive my whole family nuts if I didn't work. But my point being is I get a lot of my leads from bigger investment bankers. The deals that are too small for them. I have a few groups down here in South Florida. All the deals that come across their desk that are too small for them, that if they're not represented, they call me. And so you can speak to investment bankers. They're not going to have something for you for the most part. But you want to meet with them? Remember, face to face is everything. Too much digital shit going on. Pardon my French. You want to meet with people face to face and impress them what you're looking for. And they'll keep in mind if something comes across that may be of interest, you will be surprised where it's going to come from because you don't know where it's coming from. So they could be a terrific resource for you. Network with attorneys, accountants, financial planners, chamber of commerce, get access. Some will, some won't work. It doesn't matter. You just got to get in front of all of these. Then if there's any businesses, PE firms. PE firms similar to investment bankers. They got offers all the time. The average PE firm gets 1,000 decks a year. Buy one business. A lot of those are not represented. So the crumbs, things that are not even interested, the crumbs can be delicious. Introduce yourself to a couple of PE firms or as many as possible. Say, hey, if you come across anything across your desk, I don't need you to validate it. I don't need you to qualify it. Nothing whatsoever. Just find out if it's okay if you send me the deck. If there's an NDA required, don't, but just put me in touch with the individual who's representing them or have the seller call me. And on that note, make sure you have really good contact information. And I implore you, again, meet with these people. I don't know what town you're in. Thomas, you're in Bend, Oregon. I guarantee you there's 5 PE firms based in Bend, Oregon. Right? I'll bet there's 5. I don't even know who they are. Go meet with them. Get a proper business card. Clean up nicely. Not that you don't look terrific now, but go. Good. No, you look good. And then you want to meet with them face to face, and you impress upon them. Separating yourself from the 15 million people that are looking for businesses. This is how you do it. You go face to face and you have a meeting with a private equity firm or various ones. I just want your crumbs. That's basically the pitch. Okay. Trade associations, also good, especially what type of business you want to buy. If there's any trade shows, go to the trade shows. If you want to buy a business in a particular industry, I guarantee you, I feel like the guy from Men's Warehouse. I guarantee he'll like the way you look. But I guarantee you, if you immerse yourself in that industry, you are going to find a business. I will bet on it. Whether or not you buy it, that's your business. But I guarantee you, you're going to find a business. And if you go through these stages of identifying the right business and know what the right business, I guarantee you're going to find what's going to be perfect for you as long as you recognize that that's the industry you want to focus upon. You do all this, you focus in that industry, you will find a business guaranteed 100%, not 99, 100%. Because businesses sell every 5 years. You know that metric? 10 million small businesses in the United States that we could be deemed to be acquirable. Not the ones that, just one owner operated. The average business sells every 5 years. 10 million of them. So there's 2 million businesses for sale all the time. You're going to find one. So I can tell you, it's 100%, not 99, 100%. You drill down to know what type of business is right for you. Once you know that you want to buy an X company, finding it is like falling off a log easy. Call owners. They may not be selling, but they know of someone who is. And they know the industry. So focus on the industry, get in with trades, go to trade associations, call owners in the industry, etc. Now I'm going to talk to you. It's okay. You can go move ahead. Thank you. Now I'm going to talk to you about the magnificent solicitation letter. One thing we talked about was the emails and how it's an ineffective way to operate. And I'm going to give you something to compare and contrast this to. I call this the magnificent solicitation letter because our clients over the year have had a wide range of success from 2 to 40%. But the goal is, keep in mind, sellers and brokers, when I say sellers, owners, sellers and brokers are bombarded with solicitations. Every business owner, they get letters every day from business brokers. Have a buyer for your business. They're interested, would like to come in and talk to you. And it's just a solicitation to try to get a listing. They don't have a buyer. Your other searchers, I call them finders, they'll probably be searchers forever. They're sending out letters. They're sending out emails. They're making phone calls. They're hiring people to make phone calls. Business owners are bombarded. Bombarded. Every day they get letters or inquiries. Emails, some phone calls, mostly emails, a lot of broker letters. This process only works if once you have a targeted type. And the results have been magnificent in some cases, other cases lower, but by and large, it's phenomenal. And again, this is not eliminating everything we just talked about the way you create deal flow once you know the business. This is over and above. It only works once you have your targeted business, and whoever sends the letter makes all the difference. And here's the letter. I'm going to show you the letter in a second. This is critical, folks. You want to get your attorney to send a letter. This is the secret sauce, guys. You want the letter to come from your attorney's office. You have a buddy who's an attorney. All you want him to do is their letterhead. They're going to show you the attorney. There's no liability. You don't have to do any work, but you want it coming from the attorney's office on a nice envelope, no labels, from the attorney, because here's what happens. Everybody opens a lawyer's letter. Everybody. And it's addressed to Rodrigo Rojo, okay? At the Rodrigo's commercial, whatever, okay? And it's from the law firm of whatever. Rodrigo is opening the letter. That is critical. Like if you take one thing from this whole day today, it's this, okay? It works with 2 to 3, but nowhere near as effective as 1 or 2 businesses. And again, I can't, impart enough how important it is to get that to that one business type. 1 or 2 maximum. 1, the best. Where to get the list? You should test different ones. There's a lot of shit lists, crap lists, on the marketplace. You have to sometimes test different lists. I will tell you that Zoom info is horrible. Data Axle has been not bad in my experience, but play around with the lists. The lists have to have the owner's name on them. And the letter has to be addressed to the owner, not to the company. Because if it goes to the company and you're not the owner, the last thing you do is you're giving the owner a letter if you think the business is going to sell. Okay, so it's got to be addressed to the owner. If ever written communication with hard to reach prospects, so if you have a particular business you heard about and you think that may be a good one, send them the letter by FedEx. Okay, so that's like mail on steroids. right? If you want to get to someone in particular, send it to FedEx. I'm not saying to send 300 letters by FedEx, but if there's a group of, if you have a group of 20 that are in your geography and they're the type of business, you send it from your lawyer, send it by FedEx, worth the investment. If you're sending it by postage, your lawyer is sending it on their letter by postage, use a stamp, no labels for you and the recipient. Typed out, just like a legitimate, perfectly written letter from a law firm would come. What's in the letter determines your return, simple criteria, and nothing to lose the recipient. I've seen these letters constantly where they write, here's the things that I'm looking for. 8 years in business, tax returns, financial statement, nothing. 3 points. That's it. You just want to start the conversation because, again, you may not buy that business, but you want to have the opportunity to engage with a seller in that business. Because if it won't be them, they may have known somebody. Okay, you could send by FedEx, UPS, or priority mail or regular mail. If you have a low return, you might want to change your list. And again, the criteria make it simple. 3 bullet points. Let's go ahead to the next one because we talked about the letter. This is coming from your lawyer. One of our clients has given us a mandate to search for potential investment opportunities in your industry. We are not business brokers, nor are you required to compensate us in any manner whatsoever. Our agenda is strictly to assist our client in locating a suitable business. Our client is, then brief background, very brief. This whole thing should be one page. That's it. You may rest assured that our client possesses the financial strength, experience, and commitment to successfully complete a transaction. While we do not want you to interpret this direct solicitation as an indication that they will overpay for your business, nevertheless, they are prepared to pay a fair price for your firm as long as it is 3 bullet points. That's it. And generic, well-run, provable financials, employees in place. That's it. You don't have to go through a crazy bullet list. You could do that after. Because again, you just want to start the engagement in the conversation. And if you ask too much, you've been in business 8 years, everything's on the tax return, second tier of management, recurring revenue, client contracts. Forget about all of that. You're just trying to create quality deal flow and not over-index it because you know the industry. We conduct all discussions, negotiation with the utmost confidentiality and discretion. We're prepared to move quickly. Our client's goal is to complete a transaction within 3 months, maximum. 2 months. Shorter the better. If you are interested in discussing, feel free to contact us at your early convenience, or you may contact our client directly and put your phone number. Don't put your email address, just your phone number. And the reason why you do it is sometimes email gets lost. And you want to have the opportunity to speak with the seller. Because if you put it in an email, sometimes things get lost in translation. You want to get on the phone, have a nice conversation, have an opportunity to meet them no matter what. The second one is the direct sample solicitation letter, but it's written by you personally if for whatever reason you can't get a lawyer to write it for you, which is, plan B, same concept, specific, your general criteria, etc. If you're going to send out your own letters, number one, go buy yourself nice stationery. Okay. Go buy yourself nice envelopes, linen paper, get them typed up properly, printed out nicely, sign them with a blue pen, send them with a stamp, no labels. You don't have the opportunity to use a lawyer, so you let it stand out. And I will assure you that this works. It's worked repeatedly, successfully. We've had a wide degree of return on it, but once you know the type of business you want to buy, and you're doing all that outreach related to specific, the brokers, the investment bankers, PE firms, trade association, and you want to further squeeze it down, chances are you're going to find one before you even get to this, if you follow what I'm telling you to do here. But if you have to go to a direct solicitation, this is the letter you want to use, and it works. Let's go to some questions. You have some stuff in the queue? Excuse me. Oh, Manoj. How are you, buddy? I can't hear you. I still can't hear you. You should unmute.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Can everybody hear Manoj?
Yeah.
He's in the
Hi,
UK.
everybody. Sorry I'm late.
Manoj is one of those
tech
famous
issues.
people
I'm
who
here.
he's one of those famous people who bought our course and sends me emails all the time so we can answer them. You get decent answers from me?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. It's just the most important thing for me is just being honest, um, and forthright, and dare I say it, cutting out the bull. My background's in real estate, so I have an understanding of deal closing, but the nuances are different when it comes to businesses. And I've got some other people that have endorsed Richard and his work and some methodologies, and I can't recommend his stuff enough. And that's I'll write a contract on that if you want me to.
He sent me a bunch of deals and decks that I go through with him and whatever. And I'm not paying him for his endorsement, and he's not a paid consulting client.
Absolutely
Just,
not. No.
just to let you know, it's like not a paid testimonial, but it's nice to see you, buddy. Good to see you. So open it
Thank
up,
you.
guys. You can take off your mute. Any questions? Happy to go through anything. I have this list of questions that were submitted that are not related to the subject matter today, but certainly if you, I would hope after having to endure me talking for an hour and 17 minutes that you have some questions.
Do you want to do the chat first, or do you want to have the folks that have raised their
Yeah, we
hands
could do
first?
that because people put some questions in the chat. Why don't we do that? And then we'll keep opening up. I want to give people as much time as possible. Sure. Go ahead.
Okay. And funny, I see Sam actually raised his hands, and he also has the same. I don't know, Sam, do you want to just verbalize your question, or is it a different question?
Yeah, sure. I just was wondering if you could maybe go into a little bit more detail on how you developed the 5 rules and what I should be thinking about when I think about that.
Great question. So if I understood you correctly, just to go into more detail of how you should be thinking about your 5 rules.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. So the first thing is you don't want to be generic. And this is really important. You don't want to be generic. You want to be very, very specific. So things, for example, it might be a case of a business where, you have family obligations, young children, and you don't want to be working on the weekends. And that's cool, right? So you would have to say, well, I got to rule out retail, or I might have to rule out a business that doesn't involve, single parents. It could be a business where you have to rule out travel. So that would be one of your rules, where the business where the owner doesn't travel or the owner doesn't work on weekends. That's very specific versus saying, I want a business where I have, I'm able to have time with my family. Of course you want to have time with your family, but it's not specific enough. Okay. So that's really important. Now, the other thing to consider, and Sam and everybody, is your golden rules are going to evolve because you're early on in the process. So at the beginning, just take a stab at them. Okay. What you think they are going to be. And again, don't make them generic. And if you want, during even our next call or whatever, you want to send them to me, and I'm happy to comment on them to give you a little bit of guidance. I'm happy to do that for you or anybody via email. Here's the way I'm thinking of it. Again, be very specific and understand they're going to evolve. For example, in my business, one of the rules that I have, or my golden rules, is I want a business with demand in place. And that wasn't a golden rule of mine years and years ago. That was a golden rule that started in the early 2000s as a result of a business that I was in that part of it, we had to create demand. And it was just too darn expensive. And I recognized that is really prohibitive to go out there and try to create demand. And we had a company that actually raised a lot of money, and we could never get ahead of it. And if you have to create demand, means you don't even know if there's going to be demand ultimately. You have to educate people on a mass scale. And so that rule became a 5th golden rule of mine, and it replaced one that talked about earlier, that I wanted a business that had a recurring revenue. Because I like that, but it wasn't critical to me. It wasn't critical. I like that piece, but it's not that important. As long as I had all the other 4. So when you start this, you want to take a stab at them and then understand as you look at businesses and you learn about businesses and see, you like this about that, you don't like that about that type of business, etc. Your golden rules are going to start to crystallize. Now, while I tell you that they're going to evolve, you don't want them to evolve forever. You want to get to them as quickly as possible, but you just take a stab to start. Hopefully that answered that, Sam. Okay, we got hands up. Josh, should I just see who else hands is here, or Sia, you tell me, go ahead.
Let me just do one quick question for Marlon. I think that should be fairly quick. Should the letter to the owner be marked confidential so the secretary or another employee doesn't open it by mistake?
Yeah, you can. Typically, a lawyer's letter will be addressed that way, but yes, it's a great question. And yes, and certainly if you're sending it out directly, absolutely. No problem whatsoever. It's fine to mark personal and confidential. Yes.
Awesome. Then let's go ahead move on to Josh then, please.
Okay. Hey, thanks, Richard. This has been great. I'm doing a pretty local search. I want to stay in my local geography. And I've got a few verticals that I'm looking a little further afield, but primarily I'm being a bit opportunistic. I'd rather have something close to home to where I am than something perfect further away. How would you modify the approach for a local search?
Well, I think the one thing you have in your advantage is you could speak to a lot of local people. I mean, if you really get the word out. So the geography, that's actually a huge advantage, because when people have this open-mindedness, which is great to say, I'm prepared to move anywhere. Well, it's a very big country and you have a tendency to scatter your forces. So I think you certainly that can be advantageous, right? I would definitely take it. You're not going to have where are you located, by the way?
Santa Cruz, California, and then San Jose is a larger market that's still kind of in range.
I think you would be able, because it's so focused, you're going to be able to, once you get to the business that you think may be right type of business, and because there is limited geography, so you may have one or two types versus the ideal one. I would suggest one or two because you have a limited geography. Then I would approach those owners first with a letter by FedEx. It's also if you can get anybody who knows any of them. I mean, that would be ideal. I don't know if it's that tight a community, but I would clearly try to get through the networking, find out if there's any associations. So, for example, if you're looking, whatever industry you're looking for, is there a local group that gets together with it? The same Chamber of Commerce in smaller towns certainly would know somebody. But I think you probably, like if you're looking at, I'm just picking out arbitrarily, like I always do with HVAC companies, there's only going to be so many of them where you are. Right? There's not going to be 500 of them. There's going to be a limited amount. So I would spend my money on it, on the direct solicitation and send it by FedEx and try to find out if there's anybody who gets together. The other thing that I would do, for example, is if you can take advantage of any of the services that people provide. So if you're looking to acquire a company and there's even the possibility that you may require those services yourself, set up an appointment like you're a customer. That works great with residential services, especially if it's not, if it's a distribution business, it's harder. But if it's a company that deals at all with consumers, set up an appointment like you're an employee, like you're a customer. And I admire that you want to stay local. It's nice. There are some advantages, there are some disadvantages, some challenges, but you can generally will find someone who knows someone who knows someone who knows that business owner, and try to work it from that regard. But you may have to, instead of the ultimate one type of business, you may have to have two or three, just because it's just limited in scope.
Yep, makes sense. Thanks.
Of course.
Awesome. Let's go with Patrick next.
Well, thanks, Richard. This is great, by the way. Very authentic, and I love this because I hear and see the same thing on Search Funder regarding gurus and these people, and it's just like, you can't buy a business with no money down and just, think it's going to be a great business. Like, it just doesn't happen. If you've met with it.
Doesn't happen. Thank you, Patrick. I appreciate it. Yep.
So, super great. And my question was going to be around location. Like, I'm doing a location-based search out of Nashville. But the other thing that I hear, and I wanted to get your perspective on this, is buying large or buying small. Like, I'm kind of in a financial situation where I've done well and I could buy a business cash or, put an amount of financing on it that I would be comfortable with paying off if I needed to. But everything says like, oh no, you got to buy these $3-4 million businesses that's going to drive, SBA debt and all this personal guaranteed debt. So I wanted to get like your perspective on small versus large and kind of what you've seen there in terms of success.
So my first reaction, and I've had this question plenty of time, I like to buy the biggest business you can buy. Okay. With that said, is, smaller businesses generally are going to have an opportunity to really move the needle. The reason why I like the biggest business you can buy, as long as it's a business that you are bulletproof confident you could manage the business. You don't want it to be too much for you to manage. That, especially if this is your first acquisition, it's got to be manageable for you. Okay. But the thing that I like about with larger, it's not always the case, but more often than not, there's processes, procedures, a second tier of management in place. There's more infrastructure. So I like that part. Okay. And so I do believe strongly you buy the biggest business you can buy that you're very comfortable with. And I will tell you, never pay cash for a business. Even on the smaller end, even if you got it, don't write the check. Because if you're buying a business from an owner operator, they got to have their cojones on the line. And the only way to validate what they've represented to you is they have to give you a note. Could be a smaller note in your case. It might be 30% or whatever, but you have to have them in the mix and skin in the game. And so, for me, when I'm looking at that particular question, if you're comfortable with your skill set and the right business and what have you, I would try to buy the biggest business I can just because of what's in place, and being able to operate. Conversely, when you don't have any money or you have a little amount of money or whatever, I bought my first business with 30 grand. I mean, I talked earlier, I don't know if you're on the show, on at that point, which is today's equivalent to 75. If it's a case of people that you don't have the money or whatever, you got to get into something.
Yeah.
If not, you just sit on the sideline. So that would be my answer is, in your situation, if you're comfortable operationally, I buy the biggest business I can with debt or leverage that you're very comfortable with. Don't stress yourself. Calculate a decline. And as long as you're cool with that, absolutely.
Okay, cool. Great. Thank you.
Of course.
Awesome. Jessica.
Yay, Jessica. Did you ask me enough questions over 3 days?
No, I'm back for more.
Okay.
No, this is one that we didn't talk about, and I've been spending a lot of time thinking about it as I'm meeting searchers from across North America. I'd love to know from your time, what are the regional differences, specifically like the difference between search in the States versus Canada, or if that exists?
I don't think there's a much difference. I think the concept funded search out of Stanford from 35, 45 years ago or what have you, I think that's one part of the equation, which is much more applicable to the US than it is for Canada. But I really believe people get too way into the weeds of search and what have you. This is basic. This is buying and selling businesses. You have your choices related to financing, and the search term really only impacts related to how the financing is going to come to place and investors or not. But the process of and the other part related to the US that you don't have in Canada is you have SBA 7A loans in the US and the smaller scale that can lend up to $5 million. But you don't have that in the UK. That's a game changer. There's no doubt. But it's a game changer also for the opposite way. Some people are not comfortable with the security and collateralization that they have to put up typically in the SBA loans. So the processes mirror themselves. Mike and Iggy, who you know well, bought tons of businesses, followed my course using tons of business there in Canada, Alberta, Vancouver, whatever. The only difference is really the financing. There's a little bit of tax issue, what have you. There's a lot more similarities. But, if you're going to be triangulating with searchers in the US, if you feel that's beneficial, there's not that big a difference. The process is 95% the same.
Thank you.
Of course.
Excellent. I think Manoj, you're next, sir.
Hello, brilliant, Richard, as always. I've got a two-part question, if that's okay.
Of course.
I've just come across Search Funder, and I've been going around self-funding myself on my acquisitions. I know it's how long's a piece of string kind of question, but traditional versus self-funded. I'm going a self-funded route. However, this might help the rest of the audience. What I've found is I'm doing some consulting for equity. So I want to get paid to vet my own deals. Does that make sense? Someone find your thoughts around that.
When you say you're going to get paid to vet your own deals?
So when I'm looking for deals, rather than saying I'm going to acquire a full 100% of the acquisition, I might apply, do some co-consulting with people in my network to help with marketing, for example, or help with sales. Grow their business and say, look, they might give me, say, X amount up front. So you're not a consultant or an advisor.
Got it.
You're a mentor. So this way, this funds my acquisition. Now, I start building a relationship. I start building know, like, and trust. Helps me my personal cash flow. And then later on, we have a discussion about where this is going to go. Instead of, what I'm finding is, as you know, you go around, you have seller meeting, etc., that don't go anywhere. And you can spend months spinning your own wheels and we've got lights to switch on and food on the table. So I want to see your idea around that and what your thoughts are around that.
Well, I think
Really.
it's I mean, I think if you could bring value to the equation to anybody that's looking to acquire a business, I think it's always something that people would want and would welcome. You know, what I've thought about as you were asking the question, I wasn't thinking about my answer before you finished asking it. But one of the places that I went to with this is one of the things that people should consider that may not be in the situation, like Patrick, for example, who has the opportunity or the funds to execute a transaction, is don't be afraid of buying less than 100% of the company. Don't be afraid if you're in a situation where we really don't have the money. The first thing is you're not buying the business for zero money down. We've established that, right? Everybody is now clear as day, right? That's not going to happen. But very often, sometimes in these companies, what works, you get along with a seller well. It may make sense for you to go and work there for a little while. You can get a real good feel for the seller. The seller gets a real good feel for you. If you have, they'll be infinitely more inclined to finance an even bigger part of the deal when they know who you are and you've been working together for a year or so. And after a few months, if it doesn't make sense, it's very easy for you to exit. Hey, this is not the right business for me. But your financial restrictions may prevent you from making an acquisition. That's what I talked about very earlier. And have realistic expectations. Sometimes you got to buy a smaller business. Don't get so hung up on this idea. See, this whole world of search is talked about like, you buy these businesses, there's lots of investors, you bring in them, they make a presentation, they're going to write you big checks. It doesn't happen that often. It happens to certain people, but not often. So better, like to me, get in the game at any level, especially if you have to replace or generate an income. I get it, but there's other ways to get into this. Don't get so sold and think about it this way. If you sort of look at this apprentice level, or I've had deals where I bought 60% of the business and then bought 8% for 5 years. And I started off, with $30,000. To me, it's more important that you get into the equation, and it's getting into business and what makes sense for you. That's sometimes you just have to look at it a little differently.
Perfect. Thanks, Richard. Really appreciate that. Thank you.
Awesome. Rodrigo, I believe you're next.
Great, thanks. Hi, Richard. Thank you so much for your time and your insights. I really appreciate it.
Of course.
And as you know, I'm not a searcher. I'm a business buyer without funding. Right? That's
what you're. Yeah, you don't even have to
put.
put the last two words in there. You're a business buyer. Beautiful.
Yeah. So I'm here, as you know, I'm based in Canada, Montreal. Which, by the way, I don't see the Canadians jersey behind you anymore. So I don't know what's going on there. Yeah, there you go. Nice.
It's either that or the Buffalo Bills. That's what hanging up all the time. Yeah.
Okay, great. So I'm gonna piggyback on Jessica's question. Since, as you know, we don't have yet the SBA per se here.
Yeah.
I want to take that first step into working on financing. And I was thinking about going to the BDC here or the top 5 banks here. Would that be step 1? Would you recommend that? Or what would be step 1 for us here in Canada?
So let me tell you my take on financing, and especially for individuals that you're looking to get into your first business. You got to do whatever the hell you have to do to get the money. I mean, that's just the reality of it. It'd be wonderful if the banks are sitting there with their vaults open, wanting to lend you money, but it's just not reality. And so you have to put out as many tentacles as possible, and wherever you can get the money and the best, and you negotiate the best deal possible. And it's not going to be fantastic, but it's going to be good enough, because you just got to get into the business, and you don't want to spend so much time chasing money or the perfect deal that you forget to get the money. Because if you got to get to an outside source for funding, that's exactly what you have to do. You got to get to an outside source for funding. The deal may not be perfect. You may have to give up too much equity. There may be some debt. You don't want to put yourself in a terrible position. You won't. Just get the money. Get the commitment, get the money. That's the goal. On the next deal, the 3rd, the 4th, the 5th, if that's how you so choose to go down this path, it gets much easier because people are going to bet on your track record, right? I can go to a bank and I can get money to finance pretty much any deal. within reason, right? I mean, but like a pretty substantial deal. And it's not because they like me. It's not because I dress well. It's because I have a track record. And you don't have that advantage. So at the beginning, you have to take what you can get and get in at any cost without, you're not prostituting yourself. The deal may not be perfect, but yes. So I would do every one of those avenues. Everyone. And private investors as well. And never, ever, ever get away from seller financing. I mean, that people are afraid to ask. And most sellers tell you what, it's becoming so much more common now that it's the only way for sellers to bridge the deal. So that's a big part of it as well.
Great. Thank you so much.
Go Habs. Right.
All right, we got Rod next.
Hey, Richard, thanks for all your insights today. Appreciate it. You sort of answered probably half the question with Rodrigo, so I appreciate it. It's about financing. So in my situation, I think I'm going to do an SBA loan. I'm a self-funded searcher here in the US. But I'm curious, I can probably raise enough for the down payment and everything with family and friends investment. That'll be better terms, I'm sure, than any other investor. Family and friends are going to be happy to do it at probably more reasonable terms. But would there still be an advantage in maybe including, institutional investors or more, I guess, professional investors on the cap table? Or should I just, if I can get family and friends money and that covers it, should I just go with that?
Yeah, I think there's one thing to consider, though. You want to make sure that everybody, if you're bringing family and friends, everybody understands the rules of engagement from day one. Because the quickest way to ruin a relationship is over money. And it's never worth ruining a relationship over mostly anything, but certainly not over money. So I think, excuse me. So that should be given strong consideration. So everybody's expectations are known, because this is not guaranteed, but they know the upside, they know the downside. So with complete transparency and put agreements into place with everybody. So it's just much easier, because stuff goes bad pretty quickly in those situations. I'm not saying anything to deter you from doing that. It's just be very, very clear with one another and what the expectations are. And you don't want to ruin a relationship. Now, given if you have adequate from all of that, yeah, because you also have the benefit when you have a seller who's financing the deal, or friends or families or whatever. If the business runs into any trouble, you're going to get relief from those people. You're not getting it from the bank. You don't pay the loan, they're coming to take the place. And so it gives you some really advantageous leeway. And similarly, you could look at it and say, hey, the business does well over a little bit of period of time. You could always recapitalize it and take debt on and pay them off. But be very clear what their expectations are, if they're getting equity. And as long as everybody knows in advance what the rules of engagement are, I mean, certainly preferable to go down that road. I mean, the SBA has wonderful leverage, but there's also significant collateral that you have to put up and guarantees, and it's not for everybody. I would, however, suggest that you go get an SBA pre-qualification letter immediately, even if you have no intention to use it. We talked about that, because you'll be able to show it to the party. So that my answer is yes. I would forget about, if you can get them all from friends and family, I don't want to worry about the other investors, as long as everybody's very clear and you never jeopardize the relationship. That's just my perspective.
Yeah. Thank you.
Awesome.
Sure.
Let's go with we have two more questions. Richard, just a heads up. And Tomas is next, sir.
Thank you, Richard. This is wonderful. I'm going to jump right in. I'm in the place. I'm chatting. I'm actually having the flirting conversation. I haven't heard any numbers, so I feel like I'm doing well on asking the questions and getting to know a business right now and what the owner does day to day. My questions really, we're starting to get to the point where we're discussing financing. And I'm in a fortunate place where I could probably SBA the whole thing out. He's a younger seller, 62. He's got a few more years.
I'm glad you said that, because I'm 62. Because if you said he was an old fart and then said 62, we would have a problem. Okay, that's a good start, Thomas. Okay,
I want to be spending time on the beach all the time at 62 as well. So, but so we're starting to discuss like alternate financing, where I would come in with a good bit of cash as a down payment, but royalties, seller notes with like EBITDA targets. So thoughts on that? I just haven't been able to find a great resource of information on kind of playing that alternate financing game.
Well, the good news is you found a good resource now. I'm looking at you. and you're looking at it. So that I could certainly help you with. But I think the way you framed it as to how you've evolved with this particular individual, that itself is very is really commendable, because you're getting into these conversations a good way, and there's open-mindedness and there's good back and forth between the parties. And that's what happens when you establish trust with the seller, and you don't just jump into the numbers and the deal terms right from the beginning. You evolve to that. So that what we talked about earlier, I mean, there's a clear example. I think you want to look at what are your biggest concerns related to the business, and that determines whether or not performance-based deals or a component of performance-based deals make sense. You could want to leverage as much as possible. I'm a big believer in leverage, as long as the business can afford it. The other thing is anything that's related to earnouts, they should be based on valid information, meaning you don't try to negotiate an earnout for the sake of having an earnout. It's got to be based on the fact that either there's customer concentration, or there's something that just happened recently that the business declined, or there's a reason why it's going to increase. So all of these components that you're talking about with this individual are valuable. And you could look at putting all these pieces together. But with that said, I caution you one thing. Anytime you have performance-based deals, earnouts, royalties, whatever, you've got to make them crystal clear. That's because these relationships go south fast. Oh, I didn't know. I didn't realize you were going to hire your wife and she's paying her $100,000 a week. You have to take her off. No, she works in the business. She's generous. Oh, no. But we could have hired someone for $60,000. So anytime you do these components, you want to have the formula has to be agreed to in advance. Number one, crystal clear. Both parties should have the opportunity to audit it. Personally, I like the idea that if it's going to be subject to an audit, you both agree in advance who's going to be the auditor. You keep the formula simple and the time frame reasonable. So when you're talking about an earnout, generally the buyer wants the longest period possible, the seller wants the shortest period possible. So you have to come up with somewhere in the middle. But those are the components. The formula is really, really critical. And I wouldn't add in components just for the sake of adding in components. Identify what your biggest concern is. Is it a customer concentration issue? Is it the sustainability of the business? Is it suppliers remaining on board? Whatever it is concerned, and there may be a few of them, so you put them in a priority list and make sure that the biggest concerns you solve for those by deal terms that make sense. And similarly, at any point you want to email me with an outline of what the issues are and how you're going about doing it. I'm happy to weigh in for you.
Okay, no, I greatly appreciate that. Thanks.
Of course.
Quick follow-up, is it like my inkling is to get them out of the business as quickly as possible? Is that, I know he has the 17-year relationship with a lot of the clients.
Okay. So you want to make sure you have an effective transition. Mm-hmm. And you may, in some cases, have to keep someone on cosmetically to deal with the clients or what have you. My view on things, you get in there, learn as much as you can, as fast as you can, get them the hell out as fast as you can. You want to have the opportunity, you want to have a long-term transition, so they stay for, paid for 60 days or unpaid for 30 or 60 days, then a consulting agreement that may go over. You'll see how things go, the relationship with the clients, that's great. But the sooner you can get them out, the better, because if not, employees are going to start asking them questions. They're going to be circumventing you. You got to put your stamp on the business. And so, you have to look at saying what it is why you need them there, for how long. Give yourself the opportunity to tie them up for a long period of time. But as soon as you feel comfortable, you're the sheriff, new sheriff in town, get them out of there. Okay, Jacob has been waiting patiently.
Yeah, hey, how you doing? And thank you, like everybody else. This has been extremely helpful.
Great.
I'm located in New Jersey.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah, I know it's I don't claim the state as my own, but I'm originally from Louisiana. Actually, I was in the Marine Corps. Former wife was from New Jersey, and we have two beautiful girls. So Dad gets to stay here, right? So
nice.
Not so. But anyways, like some here. I'm doing a more local geographic search. I've already kind of started to go meet individuals face to face, much like cold calling, showing up at the business. And at first, I started with, "Hey, are you interested in buying your business?" And that was met with a GTFO. And the second thing was, "Hey, um, I'd like to learn from you. Is there any opportunity that I could have to sit down and learn from you about this industry?" And that was met with some success. But I'm curious, and I haven't tried the FedEx letters yet. And maybe that would be a good first step. But do you recommend a first step as far as a direct face-to-face interaction? And if so, what I guess terminology or language have you used to get past the gatekeeper, if you will?
Are you talking about a face-to-face where you go to the business and try to speak to the owner?
Correct.
Well, I think if the business if there's a component where the business has customers, that may make sense that they're not like B2B, that you could potentially be a customer, that's a great way to do it. So for example, if you're looking to buy, again, any business and deal with consumer, you can make like you're a consumer to doing it. The other thing, and then you can say, "My God, good news and bad news. I don't need your services, but you may need mine. And I'm 5 minutes your time because I just want your help." The other thing that I found, and I don't know why people don't do this a lot. Most people, not all, most people are happy to help others. They really are. Not everyone, but most are. And I think if you can get in front of the owner any way possible, whatever it takes, and that very often, if you know the owner and you're having any difficulty, send them a letter by FedEx. Because that they're going to open. Or if there's an introduction. And I think if you just tell them look, I just want your help with something for 5 minutes. Most people are going to offer you their time. Some won't, but most will. If you're having trouble getting to someone, then I think you have to dig a little further. Is how the heck am I going to reach them? I haven't, most of the time it's not that difficult, but sometimes you just have to get a little more creative about how you get to them. If there's an ability for you to walk in the business or be a potential customer, that's the ideal way. Similarly, if you can't, go to competitive businesses, speak to the owner, you may find out one knows the other. But your idea of getting face-to-face is, spot on. So sometimes you may run into the odd roadblock, but in my experience, people are very generous with their time. It sounds to me like you've been very successful with this approach.
Yeah, it has been successful. I just, and to some of the points that you've made, these business owners, this is, very, very much so their babies that they've raised from birth. So they're very, very protective of it. So I guess I'm just trying to make sure that I'm meeting their expectations and presenting myself in a way that is empathetic to what they've created, right? And not be
right.
As disrespectful.
It's a great point, and maybe we raced through it too quickly, because that was the point where we talked about don't get into the weeds with them in the conversation part, talking about the fundamentals of the business, and the financials and customers and the industry, whatever. You want to start off for as long as you can and just have really meaningful conversations. Hands above the table. Sometimes I go into these meetings, I never even ask one of my questions that I thought I was going to ask. You just want to have a very nice conversation, I think, and I think you're being very reasonable and actually quite smart. Recognizing the fact that you don't want to be busting down the doors like a bull in a china shop with all these questions, whatever. You want to be empathetic, and you have to be empathetic because there's seller's remorse happens as often as buyer's remorse. They have a lot of emotion attached to it. You want to be empathetic. You want to be kind. You want to be respectful. You just don't want to come in busting in, and that plays true for even how you deal in negotiations. You don't want to win it. You don't need to win every battle. And so having good conversations, I've seen this happen over and over again. When a seller likes someone, when the buyer and seller like each other, and they trust each other, and the buyer genuinely wants to buy, and the seller genuinely wants to sell, you can't stop them from getting a deal done. Sellers will forego terms, price, conditions. If they identify you as you're the guy, they're going to make sure the deal works for you. So the more human you can make that interaction and relationship, the further you're going to get. There are some hard asses. They don't care. They just want to make sure they're getting the price and terms, and then that's the end of it. But that's not the majority of times. So that approach that you're having of, of empathy and meaningful, thoughtful conversations, 100% is the route to go all the time.
Thank you.
Okay, Troy.
Hey, Richard, thanks for doing this. Appreciate it.
Of course.
So I had a question going back to like private equity and investment bankers, and what is the method to just kind of cold outreach these people? I mean, I've never tried to look up private equity or whatever to try to reach these people, no matter what industry it's in. But I mean, how do you do that successfully?
Well, if you could do it locally, you're even better off. So if there's PE firms in your town or whatever, I always like to start at the top and work my way down in most things that I'm trying to do business with someone. In PE, oftentimes it's the opposite way around. You could start at the bottom and work your way up, because the business development people at the PE firms, they're the people that are looking to generate deal flow. They have the title of business development or associate. They're the lower rung on the totem pole. That's where I'd call, because they're going to answer your calls. And business development especially, because they're out trying to create deal flow. So if you get that relationship going and then say to them, look, can I come in and meet with you guys, or get the contact information, anyone, or who exactly at your firm can I speak to regarding this request of seeing some of these smaller deals? So business development person. And if you go through P firms, you look at their teams, right? The larger ones, they all have a business development person. It's a fancy name for someone they're trying to create prospects. Then in the hierarchy, it usually goes partner, I think principal, vice president, associate is the bottom. I'd call the associates, because they're the ones who are going to answer the phone and tell them what you're looking for and say, how do I put the word out? If I send you an email, can you circulate it to your team? If I send you a letter, can you deliver it to everyone? How do I get the word out to you? I'm not asking you to do anything. I just want to get the word out to your team. If something comes along, that's what I want to do. And please make sure when you do any of those type of communication, if at all possible, first of all, if you get in front of it face to face, that would be great. If you can't, you want to send a letter, good stationery, nice stationery. If you have to send an email, that's fine. Follow up with them periodically, see what they find. That's your easiest way to get past the gatekeeper at PE firms.
Okay. Same for investment bankers, kind of the same.
No, they'll answer your calls.
Okay.
They want to sell businesses, so you can go right to the top. They're going to answer your calls.
Well, generally speaking, do they kind of focus on a certain, small set of industries?
Nope. Some do, but it's usually deal size. So business brokers will typically look at this way. Business brokers are Main Street USA businesses up to maybe a couple $1 billion. Some of them will argue with you that they could do larger deals. Investment bankers. The distinguishing feature between the two groups really used to be, and it was more so in the past than now, is investment bankers used to get involved in the financing, and very often when there were multiple lenders involved, and they were more versed in that. But now that's typically related to deal size. Like some investment bankers will only do deals, $100 million or up, that type of thing. So okay. Some are focused on sectors, but not all.
Okay. One last thing about the attorney letter. Are you saying to actually have the attorney send this? I'm curious about, just kind of for everybody, just kind of get an idea. How do you do this where it's kind of cost effective?
You pay them for whatever the time is worth, because they won't charge you much, because they're going to get a paralegal to do it for you. You give them the list and pay them for their stationery, and say, you don't have to mail it out. I'll put the stamps on and mail it, no problem. But it goes on their stationery, their letterhead, signed by them.
Okay.
And you don't need, it doesn't matter who the attorney is. Like when you're going to buy a business and you go to hire an attorney, you don't want to hire your brother-in-law, John, the patent attorney, right? Because John knows nothing about mergers and acquisitions. But to send out the letter, he suffices. Just comes from the law offices of whomever.
Okay.
And again, perfect. No labels. So very often what you could do, you get the list. You could do, if you have a reasonable enough relationship with the attorney, you could print out all the labels and the letters for them.
Okay.
If you have have friends of mine who are attorneys, they would let me do that. Of course, some won't, so they want to have it in-house, which is fine. You pay them for their time.
Okay. Perfect. All right. Thank you.
Of course. I think we're done with questions. So, folks, hopefully everybody found this enjoyable. We had a good amount of people on for a good amount of time, which is good. I think I have a couple notes here for the next couple of weeks. You want to try to line up a bunch of seller meetings and start to craft your 5 golden rules. I think I'll probably do one of these again in a couple of weeks, maybe focusing on this thing about the 10 commandments, which is a big part of our course, which talks about the 10 critical things a business must have in place before you acquire it. We're doing some seller meetings and negotiation, and hopefully you'll find those very positive. If you want to get more information, our website, we have all the articles and lots of free stuff. Lots of great articles. If you go to richardparker.com, there's lots of articles. There's one free report they did recently called The 10 Things Sellers Will Tell You, which is pretty impactful. And then the course, we of course offer that there. I told you this isn't an infomercial to sell the course, but I'll tell you, I think you got to be out of your mind not to buy it for $200. That's your decision, of course. And by the way, one thing I do with all our clients, you can email me anytime or we can jump on a phone every time, but I never charge anybody to do consulting. Or Manoj knows that I review his decks or everything on a regular basis. When he finds a potential opportunity, he sends me the deck. I go through the deck. I give him all my questions. So that's always included. So if you, hopefully you'll find that, I know you'll find it helpful, and you guys decide, but go to richardparker.com. You'll have there's tons of free articles there as well. And if you could spread the word, I'd like to see on Search Funder what you guys thought and any feedback that you have, positive, negative. Like, I'd like to do these on a semi-regular basis. So feel free to, everybody, you have my email. If you, good criticism for what you think I could do better, or this content that would be more helpful. Like, I have skin as thick as a Buick, so you're never going to insult me, and anything that you have to offer regarding criticism, that's, the good stuff I don't need to hear, but the critiques are always very, very helpful. And great spending time with everybody. Sorry that I was blocked up and sound like I have a sponge stuffed up my nose, but I hope you found this, I hope you found the time valuable.
Thanks so much. This was great.
Yeah, this was awesome. Thanks, Richard.
Of course.
Good time,
See ya,
Richard.
Jess. Bye, guys.
Thank you. Bye.